Good morning, everyone. It's really incredible to, I think it's the first time, there are a couple of firsts here for me. It's the first time in a while that I'm going to talk without PowerPoint, which is very liberating, I have to say. I hope you all don't mind. And the second is, it's kind of incredible after the last presentation, which was great, to think that the workforce development discussion has the potential to be really uplifting. So for those, just a little bit more in background, for those of you who don't know us, Workforce Strategy Center is a consulting think tank, and our mission is to help leaders who seek to make education and workforce development work for the economy. And we've advised practitioners and policymakers, as Kate said, in a whole bunch of states, really on how to align education, workforce, and workforce development with regional economic needs. We also conduct research on promising practices to advance the field. Now, we see workforce development as a multidisciplinary public-private undertaking where all the key stakeholders, educators, workforce development professionals, economic developers, social service providers, and so on, are organized around a unified strategy. Many regions have adopted our approach to sort of sector-focused career pathways, and we're seen as kind of a go-to resource, and our publications and toolkit are pretty widely accessed at workforcestrategy.org if you want to check it out. Now in Rhode Island, we had the opportunity to serve as staff to the CCRI 21st Century Workforce Commission, which was established by the legislature a couple of years back. And then, Kate, I said on a personal note, I moved to Rhode Island 4.5 years ago and take great interest in a state where I'm living and raising my children. Great state. Now, when Linda called, she asked me to speak about workforce trends nationally and what this means for Rhode Island. Our economy today is demanding more Americans possess post-secondary credentials, and the literature is full of data calling for a new cadre of middle-skilled workers who have more than a high school diploma but less than a 4-year degree. According to Anthony Carnevale at Georgetown Center on Education and the Economy, by 2018, 2/3 of the jobs in this American economy will require some post-secondary credentialing. And there's a lot of research to support that. But we really don't even have to look to the future to see that change is taking place. Last Friday, the New York Times ran a front page story with the headline, "Education Gap Grows Between Rich and Poor." And the article cited, I don't know, did folks see that one? Yeah. Heads nodding. The article cited studies by researchers at Stanford and the University of Michigan that showed the growing imbalance between the education and career prospects of rich and poor children. And the New York Times called the changes tectonic, earth-shaking. Here at home, according to the Poverty Institute, no, check that, the Economic Progress Institute. I did actually check out your website. It looks beautiful. Very impressive. Here in Rhode Island, 14% of Rhode Islanders live in poverty. And that number is roughly equivalent to the population of the city of Newport, or about 142,000 people. Now, in its article that I just cited, the New York Times quoted Charles Murray, from the American Enterprise Institute, his theory that the gap between better educated and less educated, it's formed almost a cultural divide that has deep roots in our society. And I have to say, this really resonates for me when I consider Rhode Island. So here's the state that was the center of the Industrial Revolution, and driven by an economy where, sorry, really thirsty. My kids and I ate a really, really big bag of very salty chips last night. I'm feeling it. So here's Rhode Island, driven by, we're at the center of the Industrial Revolution, driven by an economy where really all you needed was a high school diploma or GED, if that, to earn a family-sustaining wage. And our institutions, our families, our culture developed around that model. But now everything's changed, and it's a matter of huge concern for us that 43.7% of our population has a high school diploma or less. 43.7%. I mean, that's big. Now, at the same time, the National Commission on Adult Literacy, according to the National Commission, 80 to 90 million Americans, adult workers, have low basic skills and aren't prepared for 21st century jobs. They lack a high school diploma or its equivalent. 80 to 90 million. This equates to 16.5% of Rhode Island's population. Yet, low-skilled adults represent a huge potential reservoir to meet the workforce needs of employers. And almost half of our workforce in 2030 will be comprised of today's working adults. And this becomes even more complicated. Maybe this is going to get depressing, I don't know. These guys will help lift it up. But it becomes even more complicated when you factor in the ever-increasing number of individuals for whom English is a second language, which is another huge issue. According to the Rhode Island's Department of Labor and Training, between 2000 and 2010, the total population of Rhode Island grew by 0.4%, and during that same period, the foreign population in Rhode Island grew by 12.6%. So, to add to all these challenges, our unemployment rate of I think it's 10.3 was the last number, 10.3%, is among the highest in the nation and higher than our neighboring states. So in order to be competitive, Rhode Island needs to create jobs that add value to the economy and enable our workers to support their homes and families. And we really need to look at this as one system from K through career. For a while I was going around saying K to grave, but I figured you have to draw the line somewhere. But we need to close the skills gap, very simply. Now, if done right, I was really interested to read about Governor Chafee's state of the state a few weeks back, and his call for a workforce, a governor's jobs cabinet, and if it's done right, this may provide an opportunity for addressing some of what I'm talking about. Our work with states and cities may help inform some of the discussion. We've had an opportunity to advise states that are at the forefront of the knowledge economy, including Massachusetts and Virginia, for example. We also just completed a research project for the Ford Foundation where we looked at the efforts of mayors that have been leading the pack in workforce development. And the cities we examined include Boston, Chicago, Louisville, New York, and Portland, Oregon. So they're all pretty big cities, certainly as big as our state, close. And what we've learned may be helpful, to our state's leaders. We believe that governors and mayors have an important role to play in impacting, incenting, and supporting effective workforce development. And so as Rhode Island moves forward, we would recommend it consider some promising practices. First, we'll want to get some agreement on a statewide strategy across the various agencies that have a stake in workforce development. And these would likely include, the Governor's Workforce Board, the Department of Labor and Training, the Economic Development Corporation, Community College of Rhode Island, the Rhode Island Department of Education, Human Services, and others as appropriate. In the 21st Century Workforce Commission report, we cited the work of Virginia as an example of a state where the various agencies involved in workforce development have come to work together. And it's one reason why Virginia is consistently cited as being one of the best states for doing business. I mean, I remember at a meeting I had with a former Governor Tom Kean from Virginia, he told a story about how when he was trying to bring the Rolls-Royce plant to Virginia and competing with a whole bunch of different states, he said he felt that he could confidently look the Rolls-Royce executives in the eye and say that, we can't give you the best tax breaks, but if you come to the state, we can guarantee you a pipeline of skilled talent, and beginning with kids who are in kindergarten now up through our highest trained academics. And he said that really was, they told him that's really what sealed the deal. This strategy has to be realistic and actionable, and it also really has to capture the imagination of Rhode Islanders to win their support. I mean, workforce development can do that, I think, if it's done right, if it's treated right. And so, as part of that, we need to determine or identify resources to support the strategy. And it should really build on resources that flow through the relevant agency as well as private and corporate dollars. So, for example, in New York City, Mayor Bloomberg has convened the deputy mayors of the city, who oversee all the various city agencies, to ensure that funds are being coordinated among multiple agencies as they relate to workforce development. He's also worked with private philanthropy to provide for sort of the flexible funding that allows for experimentation and technical assistance that's really needed to address workforce needs on a more systemic level. I mean, it's very hard to get all these various agencies that are, really following the mandates of their funders that are often encouraging very siloed behavior to even find the time in the day to come together. And so this may be a model for Rhode Island's leaders to consider. Now, bringing all these partners together is key, but showing results is crucial to keeping them together, maintaining public support, and sustaining the effort. And, if it's the jobs cabinet, they'll want to identify clear and realistic goals and performance measures and make sure that progress has been made towards these goals. And in funding different workforce development efforts, the places that are showing promise measure the results of their efforts, and they really use that measurement to improve performance. So it's a constant process of continual improvement. So for example, in Louisville, Kentucky, they have what they call 55,000 degrees, which is an initiative to increase the number of college and degree holders in the city and move Louisville into the top tier among its peer cities. And 55,000 degrees, it's showing results, and it's much harder to defund a strategy or program that's showing results. In Chicago, Mayor Emanuel is leveraging and improving what they call quick stats. And quick stats is sort of a dashboard approach to monitoring and reporting on workforce development programs that draws on a number of different sources. And his administration wants to make sure that workforce development professionals have access to good data, that policymakers have access to good data, and that success is measured. So, Rhode Island's efforts may want to look at how it can maximize the use of data. And perhaps most importantly, the Governor's Jobs Cabinet will need to ensure that the strategy that's developed is tying together the workforce and economic development needs of the state. And so, the discussions between Rick and Keith need to be ongoing. So, really, for example, we really need to find the place where the Economic Development Corporation's emphasis on, meds and eds and on building the Providence Knowledge District and the Warwick Station Development District, for example, where do they intersect with the Governor's Workforce Board's industry partnerships and the career pathways work? In Louisville, Mayor Fisher strongly recognizes the tie between workforce and economic development, and he's engaged the business community and educators to strengthen the ties between the two sectors. In Portland, Mayor Sam Adams, he said, "Call me Sam." He's made workforce development and was wearing like a lumberjack shirt. A little kind of different part of the world out there when we met. Mayor Adams has made workforce development a centerpiece of Portland's, the city's first economic development plan, and he's played a very active role on the workforce, in system reform. I mean, he's just made his presence known. Now, finally, Governor Chafee and other elected officials really need to employ any regulatory and legislative authority. I know there are a number of legislators here that can help to push these efforts forward. In Boston, Mayor Menino has made use of the city's Neighborhood Jobs Trust to support workforce development. He's also negotiated numerous first source agreements that ensure local hiring on government construction sites. The Rhode Island legislature's passage of the legislation supporting the Career Pathways Initiative is a good step in the right direction. But key to all of this is the governor. And like the other governors and mayors I've talked about, Governor Chafee can give voice to this work by convening, attending meetings, and especially by effective use of the bully pulpit. Our neighbor to the Governor Patrick has linked workforce development to the economic development strategy of Massachusetts, and he's actually made it the centerpiece of his current term. And he is everywhere advocating for his position on the radio and television, in schools and colleges, and in businesses across the state. In this Sunday's New York Times, there I go back to the New York Times, the Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist Thomas Friedman wrote that one of the greatest challenges America faces today is responding to the demands and opportunities of an era in which globalization and the information technology revolution have dramatically intensified, creating sort of this what he calls a hyper-connected world. Friedman believes that this is a world that America is hardwired to thrive in, provided we invest in a public-private partnership that promotes innovation, infrastructure, and post-secondary education for all. Now, the good news is that Rhode Island has a solid base of plans and programs to build on, beginning with, the good work of agencies such as, I can go down the line here, EDC, GWB, the SBDC, Department of Labor and Training, CCRI, Rhode, and so on, DHS. You have a strong network of community-based groups, advocates, corporate and philanthropy partners like United Way and Rhode Island Foundation, and really whether it's this new jobs cabinet or the governor's workforce board, there's got to be a forum to get this done. And the challenge is to pull together the pieces in an approach that's focused and clear and timely. Thanks.